God of War is one of my favourite franchises of all time, with some of my favourite gameplay and story mixed up into one huge series of games. This series has made me laugh, cry, feel emotions I never knew I could, and it is beautiful. Games that span over decades and console generations that over the span of 20 years culminated into one of my favourite video games of all time, being God of War Ragnarok. A game that feels like a movie combined with Dark Souls. So when I found out the next God of War game would be some Super Mario Metroid Prime type shit, I was skeptical to say the least. Hello, Kratos? What the fuck are you doing, bro? This shit's gonna be trash.
You will not see the end of this day. I will have my revenge!
But to be fair, this is a game franchise that reinvigorated itself by switching up its formula from hack and slash to a more developed combat style, so I went in with an open mind. Now, I did play Ragnarok pretty recently and I fucking loved it, to the point I don't think anything other than a new high-crisp movie feel type game could impress me. And unfortunately, this was not that. It probably doesn't help I'm not a big fan of the genre. Metroidvanias have never really been my thing. So with both of these facts laid upon each other, it seemed this game was kind of doomed for me. But you know what? I was pretty invested in this game. The game's opening is fantastic. You start off with TC Carson as Kratos, pretty fucking happy about that, and they're fighting a Cyclops. Like, this shit is great! And the game kind of keeps up this momentum, you know? You're constantly fighting bigger enemies until you reach the next boss, and just like the rest of the franchise, the boss fights are peak. I love a good boss fight that's challenging. It makes you learn the boss's move patterns. A bit like the Dark Souls bosses. You don't get it at first, but you will eventually. And the first half of the game's bosses are perfectly built like this. But after the first half, they just kind of become bullshit. They eventually just start spamming attacks, which isn't fun to fight against. And even worse, a few are repeat bosses. And if I'm going to be honest, a lot of the game does fall off in its second half. The first half is really good. You're constantly invested in the story until you fight the weird blood monster. You fight this boss, and up until this point, he's the hardest you've faced so far. And in my opinion, he's the best one the game has. But after this, the bosses fucking snort cocaine or some shit, because they lose their fucking mind and just start spamming attacks. The story also takes a fucking nosedive in the second half, because your story is you're looking for a missing Spartan, and eventually you just go through a shit ton of random fucking biomes that are practically all built the same, and it's just unfun and gets very tedious. And speaking of the story, it's pretty underwhelming. And if I'm being honest, I kind of wish this game was more about the Greek gods. Santa Monica can't really make new games unless they're remakes or prequels with the Greek Kratos, because, you know, at the end of God of War 3, he kind of... So I kind of wish there was more emphasis on the Greek gods, because like I said, we'll never really get to see them again in a brand new story. Like, a lot of this game somewhat follows the new God of War formula, which I'll talk about later, but I thought they could have a character like Baldur or Thor, who are prevalent bosses in the game and are constant threats. I'm pretty sure everyone knows that Kratos' brother Deimos was kidnapped by the gods, so I thought Kratos and Deimos could be constantly running into a weak demigod, so it makes sense why a young Kratos could fight him, and he could constantly be trying to kidnap Deimos, and I think doing this adds a lot more to the story, and we can kind of see the beginning of Kratos' hatred towards the gods. Santa Monica, if you like that story, you know, get in touch with me, alright? I'll set that shit up, no issue. But anyway, like I said, a lot of this game kind of follows the formula of the new God of War games. And yeah, if I'm being honest, it's pretty much a modern God of War game, but in 2D. It has the same skill trees and weapon upgrade menus, as well as the mission structure. It's built exactly like a new God of War game. And I really do think the structure being in this game goes a long way. I think it makes it way more fun for people who love the structure of the God of War games, but also for people like me who don't love Metroidvanias. I get the structure I like with amazing gameplay of Metroidvanias. Which, yeah, the gameplay, that shit's peak. The combat is just mwah. Chef's kiss. It's similar to the rest of the God of War franchise, but it's very easy to get into. It's not a game that takes forever to master. Like, after the first boss, you pretty much got it, so I think it's really good. As well as the traversal, I think it's the best the series has had so far. It's always an issue I've had with the God of War games is your traversal. You kind of always just have a walking or rolling. But in this game, you can proper run. And jump between like ladders and other platforming in this game, it flows very nice. But something that doesn't flow very well is the game itself, because sometimes there are a few glitches. There's slightly frame rate drops, and for a smaller and simplistic art style, which I'm not a huge fan of, I think that's kind of unacceptable. Like, I'm not saying that to be a dick, but like, I think stuff like that should have really been snuffed out, you know? This is a AAA game. I mean, I get it. It was, you know, made by an indie studio, but still, I think they should have definitely looked over it and seen these issues and should have got rid of them. And talking about the art style, I love the skyboxes and the backgrounds. I think they're absolutely beautiful, but there's something about the character models that I'm just not the biggest fan of. And with all that being said, I think I'm going to give God of War Sons of Sparta a 6.5 out of 10.